Hello friends! In this video I will be talking about Symmetra's problems and how to fix them. In case you guys don't know who I am a Symmetra main with over 200 hours who started playing her around the first summer games. I'm currently in Diamond rank and my win percentage on Symmetra for Season 11 was a standard 50%. Nothing special. I don't want Symmetra to be a meta-defining hero, but I would like her to feel fun and rewarding, which is something that she isn't right now. Feel free to comment below if you think any idea is too overpowered or underpowered. So let's start with Symmetra's problems, why they affect her so much, and how can we fix them? Alright, let's get the elephant in the room. Symmetra's primary fire is awful. It's essentially a weaker Zarya beam in my opinion, and here's why. The starting DPS on this thing is 60 DPS. That's Winston damage for 2 whole seconds. A lot can happen in Overwatch in 2 seconds, and tickling the enemy to charge your beam is a huge waste of that valuable time. Even though it got a range buff recently, Zarya's beam is longer by 4 meters. And in my opinion, the biggest problem with the weapon is the 20 ticks per second, which I constantly rant about. In case you guys don't know what a tick is, let me explain it to you. Let's use McCree as an example. He clicks on someone, you hear a tick, and that tick is worth 70 damage. So a tick is an instance of damage in Overwatch. But it's not that simple. You see, in Overwatch a lot of characters have armor in their health pool. Armor reduces the damage of any attack by a flat amount of 5 for any damage above 10. If the damage is less than 10 per shot, like on Tracer's pulse pistols, the shot will do 50% of its original damage instead. Now here's Symmetra, sporting 60 DPS at 20 ticks a second. Each individual tick is doing 3 damage to add up to 60. However, when there is armor involved, each tick ends up doing 1.5 damage, which then adds up to 30 DPS. Let's jump to level 3 of the weapon, where each tick does 9 damage, adding up to a total of 180 DPS. Include armor in the equation and each tick does 4.5 damage, which adds up to a whopping 90 DPS against armor. 90 DPS against armor. So let's say you're fighting an Orisa, you melt her barrier down and you're at max charge and you start chewing away at her. Orisa has 200 health and 200 armor. With 90 DPS against armor, it's gonna take Symmetra 2.2 seconds to melt her armor. Add about another second to drain the rest of her health. And this isn't even counting that most tanks will have a healer backing them up. Okay, to sum up, the problem with Symmetra's primary fire, its starting damage is awful, its range is too short, and the tick rate is absurd. I know some will bring up the charge time, but I actually think 2 seconds per level is fair, considering the ending damage. Moving on. How to fix this? I have 3 simple fixes. Firstly, the starting DPS should be increased to 90 DPS. I think it would feel a lot better to have some damage up front instead of tickling the enemy for 2 seconds. Secondly, the tick rate should go down to 10 ticks a second. Again with the armor example, at 10 ticks a second for 180 DPS, a tick would do 18 damage. With the damage reduction for armor, it would be 13 per tick, which makes 130 DPS. Tanks will still take less damage, but they also won't be immune anymore when their armor is up. Lastly, and it might not be necessary if these past changes go in, but the beam could be longer, maybe 14 meters would feel better. Next up is Symmetra's teleporter. I have a few issues with this as well. Here's the biggest one. This is not acceptable for an FPS as fast as Overwatch. I cannot count how many times I've died trying to get a teleporter to high ground but failed because of those damn fences. Secondly, the deploy time is 2 seconds, which is too long and predictable. Oftentimes teams won't make a push because the teleporter was destroyed before going up due to the deploy time. Next up is the AoE, area of effect, where one can use the tele. It is too small. You have to be pixel perfect on the thing, which often leads to many deaths. And lastly, why can't we teleport and spawn anymore? Okay, so how do we make the teleporter better? Make the thing destroy guard railings for one, and that will improve usability tenfold. Lower the deploy time to match the cast time of 1 second. Increase the AoE to teleport by a reasonable amount, so we don't have to be pixel perfect. And lastly, please let us teleport and spawn again. Next up is Symmetra's turrets, and to be honest, the issues with these aren't as glaring as others, but I still will address them. With her turret count being cut in half, Symmetra lost access to map control. 3 turrets oftentimes doesn't feel like enough to secure a point. Many times I find myself saying, shoot, I wish I had one more turret to stick over there. Speaking of sticky, that's exactly what Sims turrets are, in a bad way. Oftentimes the turrets will stick to surfaces you didn't intend them to. This often leads to the turrets dying early and waiting a hefty 10 seconds for another turret to come off cooldown. Lastly, Symmetra lost a lot of voice lines and a HUD indicator notifying the player when a turret went down. Previously, when a turret was destroyed, we would see a bright red indicator on our HUD, showing the location of the destroyed turret. This was usually accompanied by Symmetra notifying the player by stating that,
"My sentry was destroyed."
How do we fix the turrets? Firstly, I would like to see the HUD indicator and accompanying voice lines return. It let the player know their turret was down and it's time to redeploy. The current sound is much too quiet in the heat of combat. Secondly, I would like to see a quality of life option added for deploying turrets. Imagine this. Symmetra holds the turret button to get a visual indicator of where the turret will land. If Symmetra is close to a wall, then she deploys the turret just as she used to. This will avoid the chaos of a turret sticking to the wrong location and will make the turrets much more pleasant to use. Now this change is more of one that I personally would like to see, and I'd like to know how you guys feel about it. I would like Symmetra's turret count to be increased to 4, at the cost of each turret doing 40 DPS instead of 50. I think it would help Symmetra a lot with map coverage, particularly helpful on defense. Next up is Symmetra's health, or lack thereof. With only 200 hit points and no way to protect herself, I recommend one of two options. Give Symmetra 250 health points, or give Symmetra her old Photon Barrier as a third ability. Personally, I'm more interested in seeing the old Photon Barrier return, as having that would really spice up Symmetra's gameplay a lot, and in some team compositions, she may even be used to fill a tank slot. Lastly is Symmetra's underwhelming ultimate, Photon Barrier. Here's the problem with it, it's just a barrier that oftentimes is just walked through. Rather than increase the time it's active, I would rather see a secondary effect added for it, such as enemies who touch the barrier are damaged at the rate of 1 turret. This could allow Symmetra to assume a mock Moira playstyle, where lining up the barrier against enemies would allow for constant pressure. Or, my preferred idea, I would like to see allies including Symmetra who touch the barrier gain a burst of 75 temporary shield similar to Doomfist. Photon Barrier would instantly be better on both offense and defense. For example, your Genji just bladed in but is low on health. Pop the barrier so he gets a small burst of temporary health to sustain him until healers arrive. This on top of the 5000 HP barrier would make for a feared ultimate indeed. Alright guys, those are my thoughts. I know I did a similar video like this before, but after playing Symmetra a lot more, I am confident that these are the changes she needs. I'm tired of being silent. Till next time, peace.